The story of America often begins with noble ideals. Freedom and democracy were the stated goals. However, the early days after independence were not free from corruption. Powerful men sought to enrich themselves. They used their new positions for personal gain. This pattern started almost immediately. The promise of a government for the people faced early tests. These tests revealed cracks in the foundation. One early scandal involved land speculation. The Yazoo land fraud of 1795 is a stark example. Georgia state legislators were bribed. They sold huge tracts of land at very low prices. These lands, now parts of Alabama and Mississippi, were sold to political insiders. The buyers then resold the land for massive profits. This was a clear case of public office being used for private enrichment. The scandal outraged many citizens. It showed how easily the system could be manipulated by those with money and connections. Another area of early concern was the handling of war debts. Alexander Hamilton's financial plan, while aimed at stabilizing the new nation's economy, also benefited speculators. The struggle for a truly representative and honest government began then. The late 19th century in America is often called the Gilded Age. This term, coined by Mark Twain, suggested a glittering surface hiding underlying decay. Industrial growth was immense. Fortunes were made by men like Rockefeller, Carnegie, and Vanderbilt. But this era was also marked by widespread political corruption. Business tycoons and politicians often worked hand in hand. Their collaboration frequently came at the expense of the public. The government seemed to serve the interests of big business more than the people. The Credit Mobilier scandal of the 1870s exposed the rot at the heart of national politics. It involved the Union Pacific Railroad. The railroad's major stockholders created a fake construction company. This company, Credit Mobilier, overcharged the government for building the railroad. The excess profits went to the stockholders. To prevent investigation, shares in Credit Mobilier were distributed to influential congressmen. When the scandal broke, it implicated high-ranking officials, including the vice president. City governments were also notorious for corruption during this period. Tammany Hall in New York City is perhaps the most famous example. Led by figures like William Boss Tweed, this political machine controlled city politics. The dawn of the 20th century brought with it the Progressive Era. This was a time of reform movements. People demanded changes to address the excesses of the Gilded Age. Yet corruption and conspiracy did not simply vanish. They merely adapted to new circumstances. Powerful interests continued to find ways to influence government. Sometimes this was done through lobbying and campaign contributions. Other times, it involved more covert operations and secret dealings. One area of concern was the influence of big business on regulatory agencies. These agencies were created to oversee industries and protect the public interest. However, they often became staffed by individuals from the very industries they were supposed to regulate. This phenomenon is known as regulatory capture. It meant that regulations were often weakened or designed to benefit large corporations. Conspiracies also took on new forms, sometimes involving foreign policy and war. The lead-up to American entry into World War I, for example, was complex. The early 20th century also saw the rise of intelligence agencies. The 1920s are often remembered as the Roaring Twenties. It was an era of jazz, flappers, and apparent prosperity. However, beneath this glittering surface, old patterns of corruption persisted. The Teapot Dome scandal stands as one of the most infamous examples of government corruption. It involved bribery, secret deals, and exploitation of public resources. The scandal reached the highest levels of government. It shook public faith in their leaders. The scandal centered on federal oil reserves. These reserves were set aside for the U.S. Navy. In 1921, control was secretly transferred to the Department of the Interior. The Secretary of the Interior, Albert B. Fall, leased these oil fields to private companies. He did this without competitive bidding. The companies were run by his friends, Harry Sinclair and Edward Doheny. In return, Fall received substantial bribes. These included cash, livestock, and interest-free loans. The total amount was over $400,000. Rumors of the secret deals began to circulate. A Senate investigation was launched. The investigation, led by Senator Thomas J. Walsh, uncovered the truth. Section 5, Post-War Shadows, New Forms of Deception. After World War II, the United States emerged as a global superpower. The nation experienced a period of economic growth and optimism. However, the Cold War with the Soviet Union cast a long shadow. This era of ideological conflict created a climate of fear and suspicion. It also provided justification for increased government secrecy and covert operations. Corruption and conspiracy did not disappear. Instead, they often became intertwined with national security concerns. The rise of the military-industrial complex, a term popularized by President Eisenhower, became a significant concern. Eisenhower himself warned about its potential for misplaced power. This complex involved a close relationship between the armed forces, defense industries, and politicians. Huge sums of money were spent on military contracts. This created powerful incentives for continuous military buildup. The Central Intelligence Agency, or CIA, expanded its activities significantly during the Cold War. Many of its operations were covert and controversial. The CIA was involved in overthrowing democratically elected governments in countries like Iran in 1953 and Guatemala in 1954. These actions were often justified as necessary to combat communism. Section 6. Watergate, a presidency unravels. The Watergate scandal, which unfolded in the early 1970s, remains a defining moment in the history of American political corruption. It involved a break-in at the Democratic National Committee headquarters, but it grew to encompass a wide range of illegal activities. These activities were orchestrated or covered up by high-level officials in the Nixon administration. Watergate was not just about a third-rate burglary. It was about a systematic abuse of presidential power. It was about an attempt to undermine the democratic process itself. The scandal captivated and horrified the nation. The initial event occurred on June 17, 1972. 5 men were arrested for breaking into the DNC offices at the Watergate complex in Washington, D.C. They were attempting to plant listening devices. It soon became clear that these men had connections to President Richard Nixon's re-election campaign. The White House immediately tried to dismiss the incident as insignificant. Section 7. Iran-Contra, Secrets and Arms Deals. In the mid-1980s, another major scandal rocked the American political landscape. This was the Iran-Contra affair. It involved a series of secret and illegal actions by officials in the Reagan administration. The affair combined covert arms sales to Iran, a nation designated as a state sponsor of terrorism, with funding for right-wing rebels in Nicaragua. This was done in defiance of congressional bans. The Iran-Contra affair raised serious questions about accountability, the rule of law, and the conduct of foreign policy in a democracy. The scandal had 2 main components. First, the U.S. secretly sold weapons to Iran. This was ostensibly to secure the release of American hostages held by pro-Iranian groups in Lebanon. This policy directly contradicted the Reagan administration's public stance of not negotiating with terrorists. It also violated an arms embargo against Iran. The second part of the scandal involved the proceeds from these arms sales. A portion of the money was illegally diverted to fund the Contras. The Contras were a right-wing rebel group fighting the Sandinista government in Nicaragua. Congress had explicitly prohibited U.S. aid to the Contras through the Boland Amendment. Section 8. The Modern Maze, 21st Century Challenges. The 21st century has brought new complexities to the landscape of government corruption and conspiracy. Globalization, technological advancements, and the war on terror have created fresh avenues for abuse of power. It is often intertwined with complex financial systems, lobbying, and the revolving door between government service and private industry. This makes it harder for ordinary citizens to feel their voices are heard. While lobbying is a legally protected activity, its sheer scale raises concerns. The response to the September 11th terrorist attacks also led to new concerns. Programs like the NSA's mass collection of phone data revealed by Edward Snowden sparked intense debate. Section 9. Eternal Vigilance, the Price of Democracy. The history of America is a story of ideals and struggles. It is a narrative of progress and setbacks. Throughout this history, the twin specters of corruption and conspiracy have repeatedly emerged. They have threatened the foundations of democratic governance. From the earliest land grabs to the complex financial manipulations of the modern era, the temptation to abuse power for personal or group gain has been a constant. Each scandal, each betrayal of public trust has served as a painful lesson. It has taught that democracy is not a self-perpetuating machine. It requires active participation and constant watchfulness from its citizens. The impact of these episodes of corruption has been far-reaching. They have eroded public faith in institutions. They have fueled cynicism and disillusionment. When people believe the system is rigged, they may become disengaged from the political process. This creates a dangerous cycle. Less participation can lead to even less accountability for those in power. Corruption also diverts public resources. Money that could be used for schools, healthcare, or infrastructure is siphoned off. The policies shaped by corrupt influences often harm the most vulnerable members of society. Yet this history is also one of resistance and reform. Each major scandal has often been followed by public outcry.